Business Skills 360, the podcast that looks at the other side of business English. Hello, and welcome back to the Skills 360 podcast. I'm your host, Tim Simmons, and today, I want to look at how to participate in a teleconference. With modern technology, you don't have to be in the same room to have a meeting with other people. Teleconferencing tools allow us to connect by phone, VoIP, or video from across the country or around the world. You can even join a meeting from home, your car, or on a plane at 30,000 feet in the air. Sure, it's amazing, but teleconferencing brings special challenges, and we have to be mindful of things that real-life meetings don't require. For starters, you need to take steps to ensure clear and clean sound. You've probably been on a teleconference before and become annoyed by the sound of someone typing away at their keyboard. Or you've heard someone's music or the clanking of cups and plates in a busy coffee shop. It's not just irritating, it makes it difficult to hear people. So, minimize this kind of background noise. Find a quiet place and use your mute button wisely, and try to avoid distractions. Some people think a teleconference is a good chance to get other work done or check Facebook, but there's nothing worse than getting asked a question when you weren't really paying attention. Now, there are several other ways that you can be a good teleconferencer. One of the keys is giving good verbal clues to other participants, because they don't have any visual clues to go on. When you join the call, announce that you've arrived and let everyone know who you are. For example, a simple, "Hello, it's Dave here," should suffice if it's an internal call. And if you join in the middle of a call, wait for a good time to introduce yourself rather than jumping in right away. Besides introducing yourself at the beginning, you can say your name when you start speaking about something, like, "Dave here, and I'd just like to add that we did even better than our original forecasts." In fact, that example shows another handy technique that we might call signposting. Basically, signposting is when we announce what we're about to do. It could be, "I just want to add something," or "I have a question," or "I'd like to make a comment about that." This helps manage the flow of discussion and makes it easier for people to follow you. Sometimes the discussion gets chaotic. For example, it often happens that two people begin talking at the same time. In this case, it's polite to let the other person go first, with a simple, "Please, go ahead," or "After you." And being a polite and active participant also means demonstrating active listening techniques. In person, you can see someone nod or smile. But on a teleconference, you don't have that kind of visual feedback. So you need to throw in a few yes and rights and mm-hms to show that you're engaged or that you're even still there. Of course, there are times when you might need to duck out mid-call. In that case, it's best to just let everyone know and to briefly announce when you're back. You don't want people asking you questions and getting dead air in response. Now, sometimes it happens that you've got several people in a room crowded around one phone hub. It's usually pretty obvious because you get a lot of background chit-chat. That can be really distracting, so keep that chatter to a minimum and explain what's going on in the room if necessary, like if people are laughing because of a joke. If everyone can take steps to reduce background noise and be active participants in the ways I've described, you can have a great teleconference. And when it's time to wrap up, don't forget to officially sign off rather than just hanging up. Something like, "Thanks, everyone. I look forward to the minutes." Or, "Great work, everyone. Chicago signing off." Speaking of signing off, that's all for today. If you'd like to test yourself on what we've just covered, have a look at the Business English Pod website. There, you'll find a quiz about today's show, as well as a complete transcript. So long, and see you. Business Skills 360, the podcast that looks at the other side of business English. Hello, and welcome back to the Skills 360 podcast. I'm your host, Tim Simmons. And today, I want to look at how to lead a teleconference. Leading a meeting is rarely easy. You've got to manage time, an agenda, and, most importantly, a diverse group of people. Now, what about if the meeting happens by phone, with each person or small group calling in from a different location? Nobody can see each other, and there may be a variety of distractions that you, as the leader, can't shut out simply by closing the door. Sure, teleconferencing is a marvel of modern technology, but it can be challenging. If you're leading a teleconference, the usual advice about facilitating meetings becomes all the more important. That includes having a clear agenda and starting on time, which is sometimes difficult because of an added layer of technical complexity. So well before the meeting, make sure everyone has the correct call-in instructions and that everyone knows what time the meeting starts in their local time. Then, sign in early so you can deal with any technical problems as people join. And what should you do as people join? As the leader, you need to welcome them by saying things like, "Oh, hi Dave, glad you could make it," and "Welcome Janet from Miami." Take the time right at the beginning of the meeting to introduce everyone, or have everyone introduce themselves, saying their name and where they're calling in from. Remember, people can't see each other, so they only have voices to go on. Doing a roll call at the beginning lets people associate names with voices. Now, during the meeting, your job is similar to that of a traffic controller. You need to help the discussion flow around each point on the agenda and lead the group to destinations or decisions. A free-flowing discussion is somewhat easier in person when everyone can see each other and signal that they want to say something. But on a teleconference, this is more difficult. You might want to try more formal turn-taking or go around the circle at certain points because it's more orderly. For example, you could say, "Okay, I'd like to hear what everyone has to say on the CFO's announcement. Let's hear from Susan first, then Sam, then Nick, and finally Brenda." If you do let the discussion flow, you may have to encourage participation from everyone. It's pretty easy on a conference call, especially with lots of people, to hide in the background. Feel free to call on people by name, like, "Tanis, do you have any thoughts on this?" As you manage the discussion, you may also need to help people understand. For example, you might say, "Just so everyone's clear, Tanis just said," Managing the flow also means responding when people want to cut in or cut people off, like this. "Okay, Roger, if you can just wait a sec and let Tanis finish, please." Or if two people begin talking at the same time, you might have to say something like, "Okay, let's have Wendy first, then Frank." The whole point of this traffic control is to instill order and improve understanding. But how do you know if people understand? You don't have frowns and furrowed brows to tell you that people are lost. So conduct regular check-ins, like this. "Okay, is everyone clear on this so far? Any questions?" Difficulties with understanding are not only due to a lack of visual clues. Sometimes it's about how people are speaking. If they are too fast, or too soft. Ask them to slow down or speak up. And if there's background noise that's driving everyone bonkers, suss out the cause and resolve the problem. Remember, people are relying on you as facilitator. We've just talked about starting and managing the meeting. But what happens at the end? Just as with an in-person meeting, it's good to summarize action points before thanking everyone and giving some kind of closing statement. That might sound like, "All right, thanks for taking the time today, everyone. Have a great day, and I'll send the minutes around later." And there you have it. If you follow these tips, you should have a great teleconference. That's all for today. If you'd like to test yourself on what we've just covered, have a look at the businessenglishpod.com website. There you'll find a quiz about today's show, as well as a complete transcript. So long, and see you again soon.
Welcome to Business English Pod, a great way to improve your English skills on the go. In this episode, we're going to listen to a teleconference between the head office of a U.S. guitar manufacturer and the manager of their new Latin American plant, in which they tried to clarify a problem with environmental issues at the new plant. The main language we are going to practice today is what we call diplomatic language. Diplomatic language comes from the world of diplomats, which are people who represent their governments in foreign countries. Diplomats are famous for using very polite, careful language, so we call this diplomatic language. Here are a couple of examples of what we mean by diplomatic language. Peter will make some direct statements. Then I'll give you the diplomatic version. Here's direct.
We have a problem.
Diplomatic. It seems we have a slight problem. And direct.
The project will be delayed.
Diplomatic. We might have a slight delay on the project. Now, try this one. Direct.
That is expensive.
Diplomatic. Won't that be a bit expensive? In each of these statements, we used a variety of techniques and language to make each direct statement more diplomatic. We'll take a closer look at these techniques during our debrief. But see if you can find the diplomatic phrases as you listen to the dialogue. This episode also features the use of probing questions to clarify problems.
Hello, this is Jack. Is this Jim?
Yes, indeed. And with me are Dan and Angie. How about at your end?
It's just me here at the San Jose plant. I didn't get the agenda for this teleconference, just the schedule. So what can I help you with?
Well, Jack, we've heard that there's been some trouble at the plant, and we thought that perhaps you could tell us what seems to be the problem.
Oh, problem? Nothing serious. Things are going well. We've had some environmental issues, but that has not hurt our production, which has gone up from...
Could I just interrupt for a moment? Jack, this is Angie. I've received reports of workers getting sick at the plant. Could you please give us some details on this?
Sure, Angie. It seems that a few workers had problems breathing when painting the guitar parts. They were quickly treated and sent home. These things do happen at any plant anywhere in the world, and I would like to say production is increasing. After all, what are we after? No plant is perfect, and we're meeting our goals.
Jack, this is Dan. I understand what you're saying, but I'd like to point out that we heard these workers complain to the local government. This could give us a bad reputation, and we don't need the government looking for reasons to close the plant.
While I agree with a lot of what you say, I think you may be exaggerating the problem. Worker complaints to the government are very routine. We've had many similar worker complaints at our plant in the U.S. as well. Wouldn't you agree?
Jack, the point we're trying to make is that we'd like you to be more specific about what will or might happen because of this. I can understand that you'd like to focus on production, but at the moment, I'm afraid we have to give this our full attention.
Understood. Well, tomorrow, government inspectors will come to the plant. This is normal, of course, and they will talk to our workers and then decide on a penalty. After that, they'll let us appeal to their local court system.
Sorry to interrupt. Can we go back to the penalties for a moment? What are we looking at here?
It could be a fine or a temporary shutdown while we change our processes. And, of course, they could close down the plant. But I don't expect that. We've faced things like this before. Angie, you might remember our problem with wood dust a couple of years ago.
Well, before I answer that, just let me check that I understand what you're saying. We could be facing a complete shutdown of the plant because of these worker complaints. Is that correct?
There's a very slight chance of that, but yes, it is possible.
Things look pretty bad for a guitar manufacturer, but let's take a look at how they handled the discussion. When the managers in the U.S. call Jack in San Jose, they're worried by reports they receive from his plant, and also by not hearing any explanations from Jack. So they call to give Jack a chance to explain the problem. Jim starts the teleconference by listing all the people that are with him, and then asks Jack, "How about at your end?" to find out who is with him on the other side of the teleconference. This is necessary to let everybody know who they will be talking to. Notice how Angie also says,
Jack, this is Angie.
when speaking for the first time. This is a quick way to let the other side know who is speaking. Here are some phrases for introducing people at the beginning of a teleconference.
Let's start by taking a roll call.
Attending today's teleconference are our colleagues in the Rome office.
Andrew Fawkes is also joining us today. He's our chief engineer.
Who do we have with us today?
Leslie Murphy will be with us shortly.
Our teleconference members then use probing questions to get more information from each side. To probe is to search or explore. However, they all ask probing questions using diplomatic language, since they have to be very careful when discussing this sensitive issue. Diplomatic language often uses polite phrases like, "Could you please?" or "Would you?" when asking questions. And when stating an opinion or fact, we usually make it less direct, with such phrases as "it seems" or "perhaps" and "there might be." We also use certain phrases to minimize problems and difficulties when discussing them. To minimize is to make smaller, so we use phrases like "a little bit of a problem" or "a slight delay." And finally, we give our opinions or requests by asking leading questions in order to seek agreement. Here are some examples of these diplomatic phrases. See if you can hear all the different techniques.
Could I just go back to the point about timing?
It seems we have a slight problem.
There might be a small delay.
That might be quite expensive.
Won't that be a bit expensive?
Perhaps we could meet again next week?
Jack starts with an opening question.
So, what can I help you with?
To find out why the U.S. managers called him and to start the discussion. And Jim answers with a probing question using diplomatic language. We thought that perhaps you could tell us what seems to be the problem, in order to find out everything he can about what has happened in the San Jose plant and what is going to happen. Listen to these other examples of probing questions using diplomatic language.
I wonder if you could explain how you...
I'm afraid I'm not quite clear about...
I'm interested in knowing more about...
Could you fill me in on...
Could you put me in the picture about...
Sometimes it's necessary to interrupt another speaker when they're talking about less important things or things that you strongly disagree with. Angie interrupts Jack when he answers Jim's question by speaking about production, since they want him to talk about the environmental issues. An issue is a polite word for a problem. Here are some common ways to interrupt, but don't use them to interrupt too much, just when you think it's necessary to do so.
Could I just interrupt for a moment?
Pardon me for interrupting, but
May I say something about that?
can I jump in here?
Could I speak to that?
At other times, you may need to ask for more information or to make sure you understood what has been said. Jack says that a few workers became sick but were treated, which means that a doctor gave them some medicine. Angie asks Jack,
Could you please give us some details on this?
since she thought that Jack did not fully explain the environmental issues. And Dan interrupts to ask Jack to go back to talking about penalties. This means he wants him to talk about this again and give more details. Here are 2 diplomatic phrases to ask a speaker to clarify what they said, and 2 phrases that ask for this more directly.
I'm afraid I'm not quite clear what you mean by.
I'm sorry, could you explain what you mean by...
What exactly do you mean by?
What exactly are you getting at?
And when answering questions like these, or when you want to make yourself very clear, you might listen to how Jim says, Jack, the point we're trying to make is that we'd like you to be more specific. Jim means that the important thing he wants from Jack are details on what happened at the plant. Jack answers with understood, which means I understand. Here are some phrases to guide listeners to the most important point, or to make yourself very clear.
Well, the point I'm trying to make is that...
Well, what I'm trying to say is that...
What I mean is that...
All I'm trying to say is that...
Well, what I'm getting at is that...
After discussing the problem for a while, they begin to argue using diplomatic language. Jack uses the polite phrase,
While I agree with a lot of what you say,
at the beginning. He then adds,
I think you may be exaggerating the problem.
since he believes worker complaints are routine, which means that they happen all the time. He then finishes by saying,
Wouldn't you agree?
in these statements, he uses many of the parts common to diplomatic language, agreeing with some of what the other person says, using the less direct phrase, I think, minimizing the problem, and then trying to get agreement with a question. See if you can hear the different parts of diplomatic language in these sentences, which are used when disagreeing.
How about looking at this a different way?
I'm not against your whole idea, just the part about pricing.
While I agree with a lot of what you say, I think you may be exaggerating the problem.
I'm not so sure I'm going to agree with this. I'd like to hear more about it, though.
I can understand exactly how you feel, but at the moment it's just not an option.
Notice how in many of these statements we use the yes, but structure. This is a very useful diplomatic way of saying no. It works like this. Begin your reply by making a positive comment or expressing partial agreement, and then use but to add a qualifying statement or to introduce an objection, as in,
Yes, I see your point, but I'm not quite sure we can afford to do that.
I think it's a good idea, but it might be a bit difficult to implement.
In each of these examples, we also used minimizing words, such as quite and a bit, to soften the impact of our objection. As the teleconference gets to the end, all the members want to understand what are the most important things they discussed, or what they must do. So they use what we call summary phrases, which are used in statements and questions to point to the most important ideas in a particular conversation. Dan asked Jack,
What are we looking at here?
and after Jack explains that the plant could be temporarily shut down or completely closed, Angie gives a summary statement.
Just let me check that I understand what you're saying. We could be facing a complete shutdown of the plant because of these worker complaints. Is that correct?
Here are some other ways to conclude the discussion by asking for a summary statement.
What's the bottom line?
What are we after?
What's the main issue here?
I think the most important point is that
And we now come to our summary, and we hope that we have clarified how to ask questions, use diplomatic language,
And might I add, ways to interrupt.
thank you, Peter, and to make yourself perfectly clear. Thank you for listening to Business English Pod. We'll be back next week with a new podcast. Welcome to Business English Pod, a great way to improve your English skills on the go. In our previous episode, the management team of our guitar manufacturer used a teleconference to discuss a problem involving worker health complaints. The local government was coming to inspect the plant and could permanently close it. In this new episode, the management team again uses a teleconference to discuss solutions to a new problem. The inspectors came and temporarily closed the plant until the managers can prove to the government that workers will be protected from paint fumes, which are chemicals in the air. We'll be taking a close look at the language used to ask for ideas, suggest ideas, and to discuss them. This teleconference is run by Jim as a type of meeting called a brainstorming meeting, which is useful for gathering and discussing ideas. We'll explain more about this later in the debrief. Good morning. This is Jim on the line in California. Is this Jack?
yes, it is. And is everybody there on your side yet?
Yes, I have Dan and Angie with us now, so let's get started. I suggest we brainstorm some ideas and then choose one or two for further study. Would anyone like to get the ball rolling? Dan, I believe you've looked at the air quality problem and have something you'd like to comment on.
Thanks, Jim. Yes, it seems to me that the fumes are coming from the paint ovens, where we bake the paint to make it dry faster. I'd like to suggest that we get rid of the ovens and just let the paint dry naturally.
That's worth looking into, Dan. But it's very humid down here, so I'm not sure if the paint would dry properly.
Well, what about using outdoor heaters?
I'm not really sure that would solve the humidity problem, even though...
Can I make a suggestion? I believe Dan is correct. The ovens are the problem. But rather than getting rid of them, why don't we install a better ventilation system to clear the air?
I suppose we could do that, Jack, but that sounds expensive. And we've been thinking more along the lines of changing the way we do things, rather than spending a lot more money.
Well, can we consider using some other kind of paint? Maybe water-based, that doesn't have any unhealthy fumes?
You've taken the words right out of my mouth. I was just about to say that. How about that, Jack? Is that possible?
It could work, provided we find the right paint. I don't know much about water-based paints since we've never used them, and I don't know about the quality.
Why don't we look into that then? I'm sure if we use paint with no fumes, it'll be very easy to show the inspectors that the problem's been solved.
Can I just check who's doing what? I don't have a research staff down here, and...
Not to worry, Jack. I think it's been done by other manufacturers. And Jim, if it's okay with you, I'd like to manage this study, since I'm sure my people can come up with some good solutions.
No argument from me on that, but I don't want to stop brainstorming if there are some other good ideas you might have. Does anyone else have another suggestion to make? Brainstorming is an excellent way to get everybody to give ideas to solve a problem or to start a project. We use the word brainstorming to mean an open discussion where all the participants should actively suggest ideas. There are some formal ways to run a brainstorming meeting and some informal ways. This meeting uses an informal model, but the steps are mostly the same in both types of meetings. First, to welcome all the members, introduce the topic or problem, and then get all members to actively join and share their ideas. Jim starts the teleconference by listing all the members present, as we discussed in our previous podcast. All